Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Very honored to be here today among the distinguished friends and colleagues here. So I won't take the full allotted time. I only will talk about simple 5 things on how to build a culture of innovation. Culture of innovation needs to be built from the bottom up, and I'm going to give you some of the ideas that we have implemented in my past life and now, and that have yielded in success. So very simple concepts. These are not end-all, be-all. There's no silver bullet to building an innovation culture. One thing I will warn you is build it according to your structure and take the ones that you can do out of the ideas that I'm going to be talking about. So the culture of innovation. Innovation is not something like building big. Innovation is actually thinking about all kinds of small improvements everywhere. Process, technology, people. So innovation is all about building small things one at a time and building a platform of that culture so that at some point you're going to have a bigger things coming out of it. Innovation is also a lot about failure. So you're going to fail. You have to be prepared to fail a number of times before you succeed on innovation. So innovate everywhere and anywhere. So anywhere you see, from a process standpoint, from a technology standpoint, you have to think about innovation, improving what is going on in your world. It's constantly to improve. Then the bigger thing is embrace change. So change is hard, but change is important. So if you're not embracing change, that means that you're not innovating on a constant basis. If it's status quo, you're not innovating. If it is your organization is stale for more than 2 years, you're not innovating. If your products are stale for more than 2 years, you're not innovating. So embrace change. Process, people, and technology. Think about every element of what you do in whatever field you do, and think about improvements in all of those areas. 10x ROI. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here on what I mean by 10x ROI. Not especially when I said innovation is going to fail 9 times out of 10. How do I say that we need to aim for an ROI? That's because you have to aim for an overall ROI, not because every idea is to succeed. So if we were to have $1 million, you can have any number of ideas within those $1 million. You can try 50 things, you can try 500 things. Only one has to succeed, and that idea needs to be at an ROI that you have. You have to think long term. Intermountain does 5 to 7 years ROI in terms of time ROI. And then the ideation. Ideation is the most important aspect. I'll actually spend some time on the next slide on this one, but it's all about ideation. I'm going to spend some time about relationships. So you may be wondering, what is relationships got to do with innovation? So I'll give you one example of how innovation happened from a relationship for me, and maybe that'll bring home some of these ideas. Relationships, internal, external, are some of the biggest ideation platforms according to my experience. So when I was with Nuance, we had a partnership with Intel. We were already buying Intel servers. So everybody kept asking me, why do we have a special relationship with Intel? It's just because we had a great relationship with Intel. The partner manager was a great friend of mine, and we built a relationship. And over time, we were not doing anything other than thinking about what's on their roadmap and what's on our roadmap. One day I was explaining a problem from a speech recognition standpoint. So I don't know how many of you know, but from a speech recognition standpoint, when you pick up Siri, for example, today and start talking, the server in the cloud is taking up a certain amount of horsepower. So we call it 1 core. It used to take up 1 CPU whenever somebody was talking using speech. It was an expensive proposition because speech was doing about 50,000 calculations a second. So I was explaining this problem, and my Intel manager said, hey, I have an idea. Why don't we bring in some of our experts and actually have them do like a skunkworks lab? And so we brought in some experts from their side, some experts from our side. It was probably the smallest non-visible project we've ever done at No One's. Nobody knew about it, we just did it. And all of a sudden, we were able to improve the performance 3x. So instead of one speech user taking up one core, we were now able to do that for 3 users for one core. That's 3 times. If you multiply that by the amount of speakers in the entire world that are dictating at any given time, that's about $150 million of saving that have been achieved through those servers, through that just 1:3 X ROI. So that simple relationship that was not supposed to be a great relationship, or not meant to be, yielded us about $150 million of savings on the cloud each year. So those relationships are extremely important, so we have to covet them, and that's how some of the ideations happen. So the culture of innovation. We already talked about some of these things. I can't see the slide there, but we'll talk about some of these things. But most of the times, the ideas start small, and then that have a big impact. So just like the Intel chip idea, some of those are very small. I'll give you one more example in terms of how the innovation started way back at Sprint for me. So when I was at Sprint in 2000, I worked on a chipset called a telemetry chipset. Telemetry was the data chipset back then. So I went around the country trying to convince the ATM machines, the satellite providers, the elevator providers, how they need to replace their wired telephone line with that wireless chip. And they looked at me like I had like 5 heads. That same chipset now was first, so I worked on it in 2000, and that same chipset became a bigger thing in 2007 when Amazon decided to put it in their Kindle devices. So every one of their Kindle devices had that telemetry chipset. So it took about 7 years, but the essence of it was that was the start of a data journey that took us from, that is the same exact chipset, by the way, that's of course much more powerful now, that's all in our devices. So again, the idea started very small. We were far ahead of our times when we were trying to convince everybody that the wireless data is going to be a big deal, and we didn't know at the time that how big a deal it's going to be. I mean, now look at that. Without that chipset, we'd be nowhere from a data consumption standpoint. Now, I'm going to talk about 3 simple things. Of course, there are many things that you can do from an ideation standpoint, but I'll just give you 3 ideas. One is innovation challenges. Innovation challenges yield a huge number of bright ideas that we can go after. So it can start off with a concept, a design, a hackathon, but conduct innovation challenges. Even if you do not get any idea that's worth it, the innovation challenge in itself is worth it. That's because it gets us thinking like innovators. It gets us thinking in terms of proof of concepts. It gets us thinking on how to fail fail fast and learn from those failures, because those will be the successful pillars that will be built for success. The next one is technology labs. We've always had a technology lab that's almost like a skunkworks project. So even today at Greenway, we're experimenting with facial recognition and things like that in our skunkworks project that is completely separated out from our typical R&D. So we're doing demos for next HIMSS that are very futuristic, that have nothing to do with what our products are doing right now in our technology labs. So we're creating facial recognition technology. We're even working on fingerprint reading and things like that, so that we can figure out how to let customers use our system seamlessly. And the last one is advisory boards. So advisory boards yield a ton of ideas as long as they have the right mixture of internal and external stakeholders. And the other thing is, once you put all this in the funnel, you have to create a process for it. You have to be disciplined about it and pick the ideas that you want to go forward with on proof of concepts. Again, pick anywhere from 1 to 5 ideas. So in conclusion, take the ideas, innovate according to your structure of your organization, innovate often, fail often, learn from it, and move forward using these simple techniques. These have yielded, as I said, some of these small things have yielded big results in my experience, and I hope they'll for you too. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. So it was without